Okay. So welcome to everybody again. And my name is Eileen Corcoran. I'm the Community Outreach Manager for the Vermont Historical Society. And this is the second of our 5 so far virtual roundtables that we're having. And we're happy to see lots of familiar faces and a few new folks for today's, which we're going to talk about collecting the COVID-19 pandemic on an institutional level and for Vermont. And sort of two main guests today, Erica Donnis from Champlain College, and then Paul Carnahan from VHS will be talking about our efforts. So I'm going to start right now by just turning it over to Erica to talk about what they're doing at Champlain.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. And so I wear a couple hats in my professional life. One of them is that I work at Champlain College in the library. I'm the part-time special collections director. So I manage the college archives and also some local history materials. You know, when everything started happening about 3 weeks ago, you know, in my role as a college archivist, I started thinking about what I could be doing on my end to document particularly impacts on Champlain College as an institution, and also the experiences of our students and our faculty and staff. Life changed dramatically particularly for students who had to leave campus if they weren't already off campus already, because the announcement went out in the middle of our spring break. And it's also changed dramatically for faculty in particular who have suddenly had to pivot, and for many of them used to teaching in-person classes, they've suddenly had to figure out how to deliver the content and finish out the semester going online with remote instruction. So there was a lot of scrambling behind the scenes to try to support faculty, try to maintain continuity of operations across the campus. So I started thinking about how best to document both things happening at the institutional level and also the individual level. And I've come up with a couple of different strategies that I'm in the process of implementing. First, as far as the institutional level is concerned, I was already preserving emails that I received that went out to different groups on campus. So I'm particularly interested in making sure that I document all of those institutional communications. We've had a series of communications coming out from our president, and then also from different people in different departments at the leadership levels. As the situation has unfolded, you know, it's been kind of an ongoing series of directives and adaptations. So how can I best document that ongoing process? So I'm archiving emails. I have also not previously been in a position to implement any web archiving or social media archiving, and I've started a pilot program to try to capture our institutional web pages related to the institutional response, which have been really active, changing on a daily basis. And I've also targeted both institutional social media accounts and also some student activity social media platforms as well, to try to get a range of activities happening across our community. So I can speak a little further if you're interested about the particular software that I'm using for web archiving and social media archiving at this point. And there are others who are on this call who might also be able to share some tips with us about that. And then I'm in the process of launching a survey, a reflection survey that's going out, one version to students, and another version to faculty and staff. Some of the questions are the same and some are slightly different. And the survey is being delivered as a Google form. You have to have a Champlain email address to get access to the form. And then I've worked with our legal team on campus to adapt some consent language that I had for faculty and staff and students giving items directly to the archives to be appropriate for consent to giving their reflections to the archives, and then also sharing these reflections out. So I've partnered with our marketing team, and in the coming days, we will be sharing selected reflections that I receive out to the wider campus through our social media platforms. So Eileen, if you could make me the host for a minute, I'll share my screen and show you kind of how that form looks to give you a sense of that.
Yep, so you should be good to go.
Okay, let's give this a shot. So hopefully up on your screen now, you can see the first part of the Google form that we've developed. So when someone responds to this using, when they're logged in with a Champlain email address, they'll be able to access this. So this is the student version. A little, excuse me, a little introductory text about why it's important. We want their first person reflections to capture the individual, the everyday aspects of the impacts of this public health crisis. In addition to the more institutional responses, we've asked for some basic information from our students so that we can capture their names, their major, what class they're in. And then we've also asked them if they want to be credited with their name or if they want to remain anonymous. I felt that that was really important so that people could share their reflections as honestly as they wanted to. And we've also given people the option of either completing the questions offline and uploading them at the end of the survey, or selecting a few questions to answer right in the survey. So I'll just scroll through and mention a few of these questions so you can get a sense of what we're asking. So this is for students. Where are you living right now? Has your place of residence changed? How has COVID-19 changed how you do your studies? This survey is going out to both our traditional undergraduate students and our online students. So there are a couple of tailored questions for each group. So what was your reaction when you learned that Champlain was closing its campuses and moving to remote instruction? For Champlain College online students, I was interested in knowing what works for them already with their remote learning that might be helpful for our newly remote students to know about. I've also asked a couple questions here about how people are communicating or connecting with other community members in Champlain and also with friends. Connecting with friends is such an important part of a college student's life that I felt like that was a really valuable question to ask. And then just some questions about what things are like outside of student studies as well. And then an open-ended question at the end. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about what you're doing, experiencing, or feeling? So in this survey or reflection, we're also giving people the chance to upload images. I made a conscious choice because of my own bandwidth and the status of our digital preservation program to limit what we could take in to things that came directly through this form, as well as files in the PDF, JPEG, or TIFF formats, so that they were things that would easily slot into our digital preservation program. So I'm just continuing to scroll here. We've got a lot of legal language. It's particularly important for us because students have to waive their education privacy rights to submit to the archives, and particularly for things to be shared out publicly. So there's some language about that. And then also important to us is making sure that we're clear who is over the age of 18 in case we have any students who are minors there will be an additional consent piece where we'll be reaching out to parents to make sure that we cover all our bases legally. So that's kind of an overview of the Google form that we've prepared. I will continue on now and pivot a little bit and show you some other websites, what some other folks are doing across the country that were, I thought were really interesting, really inspirational in my own work, and that might be helpful for you to see as well. So first I've got to figure out how to move this Zoom bar at the top so I can scroll to the next, there we go. The Valentine Museum in Richmond, Virginia. Here's a page from their website. They're doing a reflection exercise, particularly geared towards K-12 students. And they've got some reflection prompts for people to consider filling out. And then they're asking people to submit their reflections by email. So there's some specific information at the bottom of this page about how to submit. So once I'm done with my presentation, I will post all these links in the chat box so that you have them all. So that's a quick view of the Valentine Museum in Richmond. Here's History Colorado. Another call for reflections with some specific prompts, some specific questions. And so they've got a survey. They've got a journal template or a guide to creating your own journal. And they're also accepting submissions in several different file formats, and also people can call in and leave a voicemail. Let's see, one other site to show you. This is the University of St. Edwards in Austin, Texas. So they're collecting information through a Google form as we are, and they're sharing out what they receive in a WordPress site that they just created. So they've got a bunch of students who have submitted answers already, and they've created features on some of the answers. So they're screening the results that they receive and then putting some of them up online with this WordPress site. Okay, so that is in a nutshell kind of what I've been thinking about, what I've been working on the last couple of weeks. And so I'm going to turn my share off and turn things over to Paul.
Hello. So our work has been evolving rapidly over the past several weeks. We sort of have two responsibilities in the VHS library. One is to sort of document our own institutional activities and responses to COVID-19. And then the other is to collect more broadly to see how the state is responding. So Eileen, if you want to make me the host.
Yep, you should be good.
Okay, let's see. How do I accept that? Do I have to accept that?
I don't think so.
Let's see. Can people see my screen?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. Let's see. I think I have to accept that somewhere. Oh no, share screen. There we go. Okay, and then I have to do that. Share here. Okay, there we go. So just on the institutional side, it's really been sort of crowdsourced and informal. I set up a shared drive, and I asked people to just dump documents in there that they were creating as this thing developed. So you can see here a staff memo, board communications, some PDFs. We were in the midst of trying to arrange History Day, which was supposed to be April 2nd, I think. So there's a lot of communications going out regarding that. So we're just sort of putting documents in this shared directory, and then we'll deal with those later. One thing that I did decide to do early on, based on a suggestion from someone who was on the Vermont Archives Network listserv, was to create a timeline of what was happening, particularly institutionally, because everything was happening so fast, and decisions would be made and then they would be changed. And I thought, well, we'll only remember the final decision. We may not remember the steps that we went through to get to that decision. So I just made a simple Word document that, again, is open to everybody in the organization, just bullets. I did put sections for national and state events as well, really focusing more on the state than the national. Just a few highlights for the national, not trying to, create documentation of what was going on nationally or internationally, but trying to put our own actions in context to what was happening nationally and statewide. So again, this is open to everybody. Some people in the organization early on put some bullets in there. Pretty much, I think I've been the one doing most of the contributing to this, and it's tapered off some. Those last few weeks in March were really pretty active, but now I'm sort of keeping track of the COVID-19 cases and both the cases and the deaths as the state makes those public for everybody else. So that's sort of the institutional documentation side. The other thing that I've just been doing in the past several days, and we hope to release to the public early next week, is to create a website where people can contribute items to sort of a statewide documentation of response to COVID-19. So we had already been using the platform called Omeka for a site that we call Digital Vermont. At first, I tried to fold our COVID-19 collecting into that site because I liked the the identification of that site with us, and we already had the site up and going. However, I found another site that the University of Virginia had developed for collecting information about the Unite the Right rally and the whole tragedy that developed from that experience. And because they'd gotten a grant to make it, they made their template public. So we were able to quickly set up a subdomain of our Digital Vermont site that we could devote strictly to COVID-19, so that it'll be a little more direct for people to use without trying to wade through the other things that are on our site. So we're still working on this for the next couple days. So some of this text is just preliminary and may change, but it is a public site now. You can go up and look at it. The URL is there at the top of the screen. It's covid-19.digitalvermont.org. So it's got a feature where it shows recently added items, and then you can browse all the items that people have submitted right here. There we go. So I've taken some photos myself, so I'm sort of seeding the site with some of those photos. I've been grabbing some web pages and some emails that have come out from social service and cultural organizations here in this area. I'm hoping that we can publicize this so we get more broader state coverage rather than just Montpelier and Washington County. I'd be interested to hear about Erica's software for capturing websites. Right now, I'm just doing the print function on my computer and then choosing PDF as the printer, which can create some problems. For instance, this website, the map of positive cases presented by the state yesterday, my printer threw the map onto the second page. So files is blank at the beginning, the first page. And there we go, current activity in Vermont, nothing there. But if you scroll down, there's the map, which didn't get centered properly with the PDF capture. So it's really sort of quick and dirty. You know, we can't spend too much time fiddling around with settings on this, although I have spent quite a bit of time doing it. So the intake form is this one, contribute an item. Clicking on that, it gives you a choice of, I think, 4 different material types. So story, poem, or remembrance, photograph or image, video or moving image, and PDFs or web page. Just to give you a sense of what this form looks like, asking people for title, date, location, description, person who created the item or entity that created the item. I should probably change that wording. And then person making the contribution in your email. So again, you have to agree to terms and conditions. We can talk about that later if people want to. The idea is on this one is to contribute publicly. So the default is publicly. The way University of Virginia had set it up, you can share anonymously or privately rather. And you can also hide your name if you want to. So that's the photograph form. The others are very similar. We don't have prompts up now, but that might be a good idea. We're a little limited in what we can do on this form. It's not as flexible as a Google form. So whether we can provide prompts on this page or not, I'm not sure yet. It'll be rather limited if we can. So that's what I've got to show you right now. So I'll turn this back over to Eileen and she can take it from here.
Mute myself. Great, thank you, Paul and Erica. Are there any questions to start with for either person? Not seeing questions. If there are no questions, does anybody else working on their own projects that they'd like to share some information about?
I actually do have a question. I'm curious about the website software that you guys have been using to capture websites.
Yeah, so I think that's a question for Erica.
That's an Erica question.
Yep. She may be frozen. Oh, there she is. I think she's back.
Sorry, everybody. My screen froze for a minute there. I've got 4 people in my house who are probably, and all 3 of the other ones are probably trying to get on the internet at the same time. But then we've had to do some close coordination. So I apologize if there was a question for me, I missed it.
The question was what?
Yeah.
So question about the software you're using for the website and email captures.
So I have been experimenting with using something called Web Recorder, which is a free open source software program. I'll put the URL in the chat for you. But it's very simple. You just create an account and then you can input a URL to start a capture. And there are a couple of really quick and easy YouTube tutorials that the Web Recorder developers have posted to help you figure out how to do it. So the bonuses is that the pluses is that it's free, it's very simple to use, and it does a great job in capturing the look and feel of the interface. And it also captures images and videos. The minuses is that it's a very manual process. So you have to think through, you have to manually go to the site and navigate through the website to create a capture. So you can't automate much of the process through this. So you have to set up a schedule on your own, for example, which is what I'm doing, and then go and you have to navigate through the site as if you were a regular user. So for every interactive feature, like a video, you have to play it through for Web Recorder to capture it as part of your file. So it is a little time consuming. I have, partly for that reason and partly just for the size of the files, I'm making some conscious decisions about how far into a website I want to capture, how many levels do I click through, for example, and also thinking through how the frequency of the capture. So right now I've made the decision to just try to capture the main Champlain College COVID-19 site twice a week. So that will hopefully capture all the content and give future users a sense of the dynamic process, both in terms of breaking news for our community and in terms of how the website has been rearranged or redesigned by our developer team to make the news more accessible, to make the most pressing news more visible in the system. So once you've done your capture on Web Recorder, it saves the file as a WARC type, W-A-R-C, which is a standard format for websites. And you can use the desktop application of Web Recorder to then view your website. So and it allows you to dynamically view it as if you were looking at it online. So whatever you clicked through in the capture, you will be able to click through in your playback, so to speak. So that works for regular websites. It also works for a browser version of a social media account. So you could capture social media accounts that way as well.
And then how do you play back the file later? I may have missed that.
So there may be other methods, but the method that I'm using is to use the desktop version of Web Recorder. So I open that application on my computer, and then it comes up with my collection of captured websites. And then I can open one of those and click through it and look at it on that program. So of course, there are long-term implications here for not only digital preservation, what do I do with those WARC files, but also how can we make them accessible in the future? So right now I'm kind of trying to balance that short-term, long-term vision. There are probably other folks on this call who have a more robust digital preservation, digital asset management program than I do. And right now I'm just making the decision to make the capture and then worry about the accessibility and the preservation aspects down the road. Knowing that as long as I capture a file in a format that is recognized in the digital preservation community that I will have some options going forward with how I can preserve it and make it accessible.
That's pretty interesting. I was wondering, does anyone have any ideas for how to capture just static screenshots other than the technique that I'm using, which is just to print, which creates a sort of a pretty crude rendition of the screen.
I like doing screenshots and just leaving them as image files, because then it's like you're getting what you're seeing. And it's, I think when you're printing to PDF, that's when formatting can get strange. So usually just like the Windows Snipper tool. There's other, free tools out there too for screen grabbing.
Right, but that of course just shows what's on your screen at the moment,
Yes.
rather than a longer page. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you just then would have a series of images, which is not exactly better, but different.
Hi, this is Rebecca. I'm from Middlebury, and I wanted to add there are some free plugins, and I can send them in the chat, that capture not just what you're seeing, but the entire scroll of a website, and then it saves it as a big PNG or JPEG file on your desktop or wherever you send it. So it's basically, it can be a foot long, and it's quite small, but you can magnify it, but it captures everything on a website with the scrolling, and I'll send that in the chat.
Wow, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I've used them for Chrome and Firefox, but I'll send a couple of options.
Nice, thanks.
I added, just while my video is actually working, so I'll share, I put something in the chat that Middlebury just launched, which is similar to everyone else's, a call for submissions from our students, staff, or faculty. And we have gotten a few. We're being really generous at this point, and I consulted with our college attorney, who said we didn't need to require some of the legal language up front, but that we could address it later. So we just wanted to launch as quickly as possible. But right now, I am hung up a little bit on some legal language, and I was curious if anyone has been thinking about HIPAA language. So specifically, the next project that I'm working on is a specific diary project. And what makes it unusual is that we actually have money to pay students or staff who identify as part of a community that's been traditionally overlooked by the archival record. So that can be quite broad: low income, students of color, LGBT. In the case of Middlebury, it can be any number of minority religions based on gender. So a lot of identities are included, and we'll have an application process, and we actually will be able to pay diarists to submit a diary to us, and we're hoping to use either a print diary. We're collaborating with a local bookstore that had to close down, the Vermont Bookshop, and the owner of the bookshop will be able to provide print journals to those applicants who we choose to write print journals. And those that use e-journals, we're experimenting with an app called Day One that's pretty useful across many platforms. My colleague Caitlin is also in this call, and she and I are both testing it out. She's on an Android phone and I'm on an iPhone. It's exportable to PDF, JSON, and ebook format. And so you can basically print a book of the journal that someone keeps. And it also has voice to text transcription, so that you can you can make a voice memo and it transcribes it for you. There's a free and a premium version. We're trying, part of the thought is, we know that for our students, and in fact, some of our lower income employees whose jobs are in fact most at risk on campus, that this is a kind of emotional and intellectual labor. And we knew that just asking for submissions was a kind of call for volunteerism, which is valuable, but perhaps a lot to ask at a time when we're really worried about survival. So we were able to move funds from a gift to support this project. And I'm saying this all in the abstract. We're working on the proposal right now. But the specific question I have relates to this diary is, there are some other examples out there, and I'll put one in the chat. Indiana University specifically, they have diary prompts, and it has like 3 paragraphs of HIPAA language that I worry might be a little paralyzing to diarists. And so they basically say, please don't include any health-related information that could be personally identifiable to you or anyone in your family. And it goes on and on and on. And I just wondered if any of those of you who have websites that you've launched, if you've gotten feedback from council in any of your organizations or seen elsewhere that need to include it. I didn't see it initially, but the VHS, I saw yours was a click through for terms. Do you include that kind of language about HIPAA anywhere?
No, we're sort of flying by the seat of our pants since we don't have legal counsel. So I've been looking out there at other people's statements and privacy statements and stuff like that. And so I definitely want to check out to see what Erica has come up with and you guys eventually.
Hi, Rebecca. Yeah, that's a really good question, and I've been thinking about that. I did consciously craft my reflection prompts to not specifically ask any questions about whether anyone in your family has been sick or whether anything medically specific, because I didn't feel like it was appropriate for me to be collecting that information from a privacy standpoint, let alone the legal one. I think at this point, what I've worked out with our college lawyer is that we will address that on a case-by-case basis. So we are planning to publicly share some of our responses, but we were conscious that we wanted to screen them first so that everything that we share out now and in the future will have passed not only the student privacy restriction or we'll make sure that if images are submitted that the people who are pictured have given express consent for that, for example, and that also that we're not sharing out any private medical information. I think that anything that I receive will require follow-up with the contributor if it has specific information related to medical issues.
And that's my, we're also flying by the seat of our pants. I think many of us are. And my proposal to at least the attorney for Middlebury has been, please let me launch this without that HIPAA language, and we can always revise and follow up later. We've also considered a restriction. One of our college attorney's proposals was we could always restrict. There are some other schools that are proposing, actually Stanford University Libraries and Archives released a kind of diary and submission for COVID, and they're willing to put a 50-year record close on them, which I'd hate to do going forward. So I'm resisting that a little. But I just want to launch first and then worry about the language later. But I think restrictions will be my last resort. So I'm balancing right now some HIPAA language and possible restrictions. So I'm kind of on your side, Paul. We're launching first, and then we're going to revise and add language. All of their websites, they can always be edited. So I'm not too worried about fixing things later.
So I just have a sort of follow-up that goes along the same line as far as the public sharing acts, part of this, and thinking about what we're doing, and again that sort of buffer between the contribution and actually putting it up. But has anybody sort of thought about or planned how to deal with reflections, stories, images that are perhaps, because this is an emotional time, maybe they are full of swear words or are talking about things that may not be appropriate for all audiences, and how we ride that line without censoring intense emotion?
Eileen, I think that's a really good question. I've been thinking a lot about that. I made sure that there was a a way for people to remain anonymous if they wanted to submit something that was emotionally driven. Right now, the vehicle for the immediate public sharing of our submissions is through our marketing team. So they are going to only want to share out things that are appropriate, they feel, for the broader audience, particularly thinking about prospective students coming to Champlain. So that's the deal that I've made with myself is, you know, this is a great partnership opportunity for me. I am going to get some publicity, some larger public sharing out of this. I know that some of the responses that we get, I won't be able to share out publicly through our marketing platforms because they perhaps won't be comfortable doing that. But I am planning to, you know, share this information in other ways in the future. Maybe, you know, not necessarily immediately, but once we're past this, I can definitely see using this in exhibits for in classes that I partner with faculty, you know, talking about student life at Champlain College over the years. I think this is a great, will be a great resource for us going into the future.
I've got a slightly different topic, maybe the other end of the spectrum. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I know there's several people from the State Archives on this call, and I was sort of curious as to how you guys are dealing with the just barrage of information that's coming out of the state, and what your plans are to try to capture the state's actions and responses to COVID-19.
Good morning, Paul.
Hey, Rachel.
Hey. So yeah, I've been talking with Tanya Marshall, the state archivist, and with Sally, who's working with me on the Vermont Historical Records program. In part because we've been approached by a documentary photographer who is documenting COVID-19 response and impact on families and businesses. So there's kind of the start, but curiously, it's not a public record documentation project at this point that Tanya has kind of focused on, in part because this photographer, who's a friend of hers, approached her. So that's been kind of our foot in the door. I noticed that the Vermont State Employees Union has put out a call to state workers on the front lines to submit photographs of people working at safe social distances, performing essential work for the state. So I did put out a call this week requesting that their communications director touch base, and if they do end up getting some sort of substantive quantity of images, that we develop a mechanism for retaining those more permanently at the archives. And just this morning, our web developer, who's involved with our digital repository, we use Preservica, let us know that Preservica is providing additional storage for free for those who are documenting COVID-19 response and recovery in their areas. So definitely there's some interest at the top, and I'm trying to kind of figure out how best to pursue that, and great to know what you all are doing at the Historical Society, Paul, and I want to make sure that we coordinate whatever we do going forward.
Okay. Other questions, comments, thoughts that have popped up or have been brewing about what's going on?
I'd be interested in knowing what people are doing on the town level, if there are any projects out there within particular towns that people have heard about or are participating in.
Well, so I'm from Norwich, and I just met with our collections volunteers last week who are really wanting a project. And I've been trying to figure out a way to gather, especially the information that's coming across on our listserv, and a couple of blogs in town, lots of photos and stories. And so I set up a Google Drive folder with a whole bunch of different topics in it. And my ladies have all chosen topics, and they're now going back through the listserv archives, cutting and pasting, and trying to sort through the vast number of messages out there. So there are topics around food, around how the schools are managing, all the things the general store is doing, those kinds of things. So that was my first stab at trying to get it, because I realized that it was all just flying by us all on the listserv too fast. And I've been contemplating starting a journaling process with Google Forms also. But one of the things that I'm struggling a little bit with is the number of teachers who have reached out saying they want their kids to create time capsules and take photos and then share them with us. And the police station, they had kids write them postcards and ask questions, and they have all those that they want us to have. And another teacher wants kids to be submitting journals. And so there's this under 18 age submission material. And so I'm thinking through how that works.
That's great that you've got volunteers who can go through the listservs retrospectively and grab stuff.
Yeah, I thought I put it out on the town listserv several times asking for volunteers, and no one volunteered. And so I finally decided that that was a perfect job for my lady folk. They have a little bit of trouble with Google Drive. So we'll see how that all works out. Some are better than others.
I was just going to say, I suspect there are going to be, in the years to come, there are going to be archives that people have created that we don't know about, like your police department example. Sounds like they're already want to get rid of the postcards, but I can anticipate further down the road that some people will have consciously collected some things that we'll see in the future. But I'm also wondering how we can collect some of the materials that people aren't as consciously collecting.
I'll just add in that so the 4th grade teacher wants her kids to make a time capsule, and she asked if I would make a sample time capsule. So I made a time capsule, a pretend time capsule from 1918 based off a journal with some prompt questions to try to get them to think about the kinds of, I asked questions about food and about helping others and about how entertainment, and ask them to collect objects that fit into those categories as a way to, and then take a photo of the whole time capsule as a way to try to catch some of that more ephemeral pieces that are key to kids' lives right now.
I wanted to just second someone, Laura Keenan, if I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. So you had a shout out in the text for the Folklife Center. And I don't think anyone from there was able to join us, but I had a long talk the other day with Andy Kolovos, who's the archivist there. Lots of you may know him. And they just, I think a few days ago, finalized a great page that I've been using on my own calls that details ways that you can have a remote oral history, record an interview with someone else, and they have a bunch of free tools listed and how to use them. So how to record a call with Zoom, or some free software that you can load onto a phone, how to record voice memos as a way to share conversations and oral histories when you're remotely distanced from someone, and it's really helpful and very clear. So I'm using it with some students in a class, but also just sharing it broadly and crediting them. That's really well done.
Yeah, that's also a great project. And I know we've been talking to them too as well, sort of making sure that what we're doing sort of goes along with what they're doing, rather than trying to repeat each other. The last sort of quick question I had, I know obviously this group is a little more library archives focused, but I know it's something we've only briefly talked about at VHS as far as physical objects are concerned, and or more physical types of collections, even in the archival space. Has anybody sort of thought about that idea yet, or what their plans are? Or we're only digital right now and that's all we can do?
I foresee a mask coming into our collection.
It'll be the spinning wheel of the 21st century.
My kids have a mask sweatshop going on in our kitchen. They've made about 100.
Definitely take pictures of them doing it.
Right. I was talking with somebody before about how we collect the lack of toilet paper. I'm not sure how you do that, but now we'll figure out how that is.
Photos of empty shelves.
Photos of empty shelves.
And I think, Paul, there must have been an email that you sent out to the Vermont archivist list where you had said you were taking some photos of signs on doors, so that you didn't want to rip them down, obviously, because it was too soon and they were in use. I walked around the Middlebury College campus and basically dumpster dove the day after all of our students had to leave campus. I think I might be frozen. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. And because that was now an empty set of dorms, I was able to take those signs down. But in other cases, I contacted people and asked them to give me their signs when they came down eventually. So I think for most people, they won't think about us. And there are great physical signs in our stores and for me on our campus, it will just get tossed when they're done. So I just made sure I contacted people en masse and said, when this comes down, let me know, because I do want those physical artifacts of those signs. A picture is great, but like many of us, we recently had a small exhibition on the Spanish influenza at its centennial, and we had very little except newspapers to show, a few photos in newspapers. So I was thinking, how do we have an exhibition on this 50 years from now or 100 years from now? I wanted those flyers. I wanted those signs.
Right.
So when I could, I took them. And when I couldn't, I contacted the store owner, or in my case, the head of our gym facility, because they were one of the first facilities to close down the signs. So hopefully they'll save them for us.
Actually curious what Rebecca's mentioning. This is Marisa. Newspapers, Waterbury Records closing down. Some of the other newspapers, that was a big amount of documentation for a lot of what we get at Visara to some extent. So that's another thing to think about, is newspapers that can't and are shuttering.
Mm. Any other questions? Anything we haven't covered yet that people want to talk about? I have a feeling we will be having a follow-up at some point, maybe a year down the road, where we all go, okay, we've got this, now what do we do? Because as you say, we're all kind of going, which I think is fantastic. And then what's the next level going to look like when things have potentially settled? Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, Eileen, and maybe perhaps sooner than 1 year, that we could have kind of an informal ad hoc collecting COVID in Vermont group.
Yep. Yep. Well, and I think, again, long-term, that might be another secondary thing of again, what are we keeping? And again, can we start to sort of divvy up long-term preservation issues so that, everybody's not trying to preserve the same things, but but that hopefully will ease the long-term burden from a preservation standpoint, if we can all talk about that. Awesome. All right. Anything else? All right. There's nothing else. Just a couple of things. Again, this will be recorded, so if you reference back to anything that's said, we'll have that available. That will include the chat, but if you don't know, there should be, if you go down to your little chat box at the bottom, 3 little dots, and you can save the chat yourself. So that way you don't have to try and copy and paste links or anything like that from there. So that's another quick way of doing that. But thank you again for joining us. We'll be back next Tuesday with John Hart from the Sullivan Museum to talk museum nomenclature. So we're moving a little bit away from COVID, but still important, fun stuff. And then Rachel Onif's gonna join us the next week to talk about researching and especially women voters in the 1920 election. So that'll be another fun one as well. So thank you again to Erica for sharing what Champlain is doing, and Paul for helping to share what VHS is doing. And certainly, you know, let us know for sure at VHS what you're doing. And I do think it would be great to sort of keep that group alive as to folks who do projects related to this or start projects and go from there. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Eileen. Take care.
Thanks, Eileen. Bye, everybody.